Welcome to BA4Space. I bring you all the business data and financial analysis concerning our favorite subject, commercial space. So let's kick things off with the Space Startup Roundup. I'm going to talk about emerging new space companies. Now, these are the startups that either promote or directly contribute to the burgeoning capitalization of suborbital, orbital, and outer space industries, and each week I take one of them and break the company down into an analysis starting with a company profile. Then I'm going to run a SWOT analysis, which is strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then I run a gap analysis to determine where their aspirations may run short due to the gap between what they have and what they need to succeed. This week's Space Startup Company Roundup includes SpaceMedex, medical care in space supporting long missions and flights open to non-professionals. Aerospace, dedicated launch for microsatellites, and then Lunar 8, designing and building reusable lunar landers that will travel from lunar orbit to the surface. So, let's start with SpaceMedex. According to their website, SpaceMedex aims to create medical care and emergency units in space to support longer space missions and flights open to non-professionals. Now, it's the open to non-professional part that caught my eye with this company. So, a deeper dive in their website specifies what this means. In services section, they offer technical and medical expertise to current missions. They are doing a little project management and from the process engineering and task management side, and offer their services in general to mission planning and post-mission study. What also caught my eye with this company is their focus on VR to simulate situations and train for contingencies from a medical emergency standpoint. While we all want to be living and working in space, we don't necessarily want to die there. I think this company has a great vision for preparing for the next generation to deal with the short and long-term medical contingencies that are sure to crop up. Lunar 8. It's a great name. That's a fantastic name, but what do they do? Their website states that the goal is to build a reusable lunar lander that will travel from lunar orbit to lunar surface, helping deliver cargo, modules, and people to the moon's surface. Yes, we have been down this road before, but let's stick with them for a minute and see where it takes us. We're going to go to www.lunar8.space/about. Okay. So they're not taking us anywhere, at least in terms of things they currently have. Quick critique for Lunar 8. Guys, we need to see what you have. If you have a proof of concept, show us. If you have built a scale model of a lander, show us. What I see is a website with a cheesy graphic, ideologies, and nothing to show for it except a GoFundMe page showing $1,800 achieved of a $10,000 goal. So what are you going to do with $10,000? As they state, the company is made up of college students, so while they've been invited to NASA and ESA conferences, they cannot currently afford to go. On to the next startup, Aerospace. Let's see, why does that name sound familiar? Oh, that's right. These are the boys I met at Next Generation Suborbital Research Conference in Broomfield, Colorado. Nice boys, tight-lipped, but great. According to their website, they focus on dedicated launches for small satellites. I think I know where they're going with this. The main problem with small satellites or microsats is that they are usually launched as secondary payloads, meaning they are hitching a ride with a larger, more expensive primary payload. Guess where that rocket's going? It's going where the primary payload wants it to go. So you better hope you can get on a launch, wherever that may be, that is roughly in the same orbit that is conducive to your small sat mission. So this is where Aerospace comes in. They are going to take a 25 kilogram payload onto a rocket, and that rocket is going to be taken into the upper reaches of the atmosphere by a balloon. So why a balloon? Well, about 90% of what we see on the launch pad using a conventional rocket is used to get through the atmosphere. Current industry cost for a balloon ride with comparable weight is anywhere from $30,000 to $70,000. You factor the cost of building the rocket, and you might be able to get to orbit with that 25 kilogram payload that into the orbit you wanted for under $100,000. Now that's something, and that's exciting. And that's what Leo Aerospace aims to do. I'm with you boys. Keep me updated. I hope to see you next year in Broomfield. So that's it for this week's Space Company Startup Roundup, and time to see who will be profiled on this week's BA4Space analysis. This week, we profile Lunar 8. How can we analyze them if we don't know anything about them? Well, we can analyze the concept. I know what they want to do, so let's just talk about that, shall we? To conceptualize Lunar 8's mission statement, let's look back on what landing on the moon meant in 1969. The whole dang mission design went up with one very large Saturn V rocket. This included a lunar lander. Does it all need to go together? I'm sure there are legit reasons for this, but if a company were to focus on orbiting, habitat, and lunar lander combo, then the only thing companies need to worry about is getting themselves to lunar orbit and dock with the orbiting habitat. Then hand over operations to Lunar 8 for landings and ascents. This goes back to the competitive advantages I talked about last week. Focus on what you're good at, stick to it. So, let's start with the SWOT. First of all, strengths. The strength of a project like this depends on the scope. Does Lunar 8 intend on being a one and done type of mission? That is, are they sending a new lander up every time to perform the mission, then back to Earth to refuel? If so, we can take this out of the strengths bucket right now. I am assuming a permanent lunar orbital presence. Orbit, land, refuel, ascend, dock, load cargo, land, and the cycle continues. So, based on this, what are the strengths? Cookie cutter and well-established operations, that's the strength. All of this can be either automated or teleoperated, with a slight delay, but perfectly within reason. Hub cargo runs, as a model, enjoy a long, well-established history of success, simplicity, and proof of concept. But it's in space, you say? One of the things I've learned in the past couple of years doing requirement sessions for many different types of companies is that operations is operations. They have different products and may use different methods as their modus operandi, but processes are very similar. And with that, the pain points, inefficiencies, constraints, bottlenecks, touch points, metrics, and integrations. Some operations are relatively cheap and some operations are very expensive, but in the end, business is business. So what are the weaknesses? I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Lunar 8 has some very specific customers. So it's anyone who wants to land something on the moon and bring it back. While we could get creative with the scope of that clientele, right now it's pretty limited. Think of the last person you talked to, and were they lamenting about not having a service that landed their thing on the moon and bring it back? Right now, this could be a common theme for space startups outside of suborbital and low Earth orbit. Who is your customer, and what do they want from you? So, here's a quick tip. Google startup checklist and see what comes up. The second thing on any checklist is writing a business plan. Now Google business plan and see what comes up. If a market analysis is not the second bullet, it's your third. Who is your customer? NASA, Roscosmos, ESA, customers like that. That doesn't mean it has to be that way, but that is the current state. So what are the opportunities? Too many to count. But we'll try anyway. Look at Lunar 8's opportunities. Let's look at a few business ventures that will need logistics considerations. NASA will need a sample return mission. Well, duh. If NASA simply needed to get a capsule to lunar orbit and dock with Lunar 8, then return to Earth, that simplifies things a lot. Well, since we're going there anyway, let's throw some university experiments on there as well as secondary payloads. This is too easy. Let's branch out a bit. I'm a space startup with an awesome rover that I'm going to charge users to teleoperate for $1 a minute. Cool. Anyone going to lunar orbit? Anyone landing anything? How about a company that has a device that turns crater ice into water and oxygen? And they want to sell those big government agencies we mentioned. Can you test that on Earth? Yes. Does it require testing on the lunar surface? Yes. So, instead of R&D costs that include building the rocket, transfer to lunar orbit, building a lander, executing the test, returning the data, we have simplified the requirements and the costs of the mission to building the device, turning it on, and sending the data back. And that's just a peek at opportunities for a company like this. All right, so what are the threats? That would be Moon Express. Check them out. moonexpress.com, solid company profile, mission statement, design, and healthy relationship with the private, commercial, and government space sectors. I had a chance to catch a presentation of theirs at a conference. They were participants of the Lunar X Prize, so they are much further along and have a much better funding. The threat and the critique isn't so much about having the concept, it is the organization of the ideas around the concept. Again, I don't know much about Lunar 8 or what they're working on. I know an awful lot about Moon Express. But what caught my eye with them was a very short, simple elevator pitch they gave regarding their venture. It was clear, concise, and relevant. If you don't have your elevator pitch down pat, nobody is going to care. Now, I've already said since we don't know much about Lunar 8, we should focus on the concept. Okay? The threat is anyone who is really good at streamlining cargo transfers and being versatile to mission constraints and requirements. The parameters of the service are relatively simple. Being versatile to customer needs that could be a competitive advantage. You want help on your webpage, Lunar 8? That's it. You're welcome. So, from there, we hit the gap. The purpose of a gap is to identify where we are and contrast that to where we want to be. We illustrate current state, future state, describe the gap between the two, and talk about ways to bridge that gap. Current state. Well, we've already said Lunar 8 has no current state, but what about the concept? The last time anything landed on the moon was 1972. But we've had plenty of lunar orbiters, and have even sent a probe called Laddie straight kamikaze into the surface to analyze the dust plume that resulted. So, without the landings, there are plenty of cases, government agencies only, of successful lunar orbiters. But no one is landing. The Lunar X Prize finalists consist of SpaceIL of Tel Aviv, Moon Express, Synergy Moon, Team Indus, and Hakuto of Japan. This last one being the only one featuring a lunar lander. They got close. The X Prize was expired and the teams are no longer eligible for the grand prize, but some are pursuing it themselves despite the contest expiration date. What came out of this was two teams that had developed, in my opinion, solid use cases for not only performing robotic operations on the surface, but how to best land as well. The mission plans from private enterprises are peer-reviewed and scrutinized. I think the current state as a concept is solid. It has validity, it just needs a little execution. So what's the future state? All right, so given the current state, what is in store for the future? Well, if all goes well, it will be amazingly boring. Lunar landings should be about as mundane as it gets. This should be the biggest measure of success, 100% banality. What is exciting about the prospect of a company that specializes in lunar landings for commercial cargo is what it supports, not necessarily the process itself. And this can be akin to getting a smartwatch you ordered last week on Amazon, and you're tracking the progress of your Amazon order and every day to make sure the package arrives on time because you are so excited about the watch. Notice how I said you were excited about the watch, not the delivery service, not the app you used to track its progress, nor the box it came in. These are enablers of the thing you were excited about. Having shuttle runs from lunar orbit to the surface and vice versa opens a door for so many other space startups to get into the game. For example, right now we are seeing a microsat explosion in low Earth orbit. That is because of smaller launchers coming online and microsats getting smaller and cheaper. Now, take that to the rover level. You know you can get it into a lunar orbit, and now you'd be able to get it from lunar orbit to the surface. The only thing you had to worry about was whether or not you made a robot that could fulfill the mission, not whether or not you could build a rocket or a lander to get it there. So what's the gap? Specializing in lunar landing and the gap that exists today from where we are to where we want to be is the best example of a gap that I have done so far. There is no real industry for it yet. Not to say that there's not the capacity, But the only reason we don't have many private organizations conducting operations on the surface of the moon is because we are waiting for the landers. There is a demand for this. From organizations large and small, the gap is the landing companies themselves. We have launchers big and small that are able to tackle primary and secondary payloads to all kinds of orbits. We have several heavy launchers from the likes of ULA, Ariane 5, and the recent Falcon Heavy rocket. Are you telling me Elon Musk doesn't want to get your lunar lander project up and rolling? So is that the only gap? No. Here's the biggest question mark on this entire enterprise stated at the top of this episode. Are you refueling on the moon? If so, the gap mainly includes that albatross I keep mentioning every week, in situ resource utilization. Making rocket fuel from the lunar regolith. Once that is complete, the process is simple. Land, unload, refuel, ascend, load, and unload, etc. Without that, it's unnecessarily expensive and overly complicated. So what's the bridge? This concept isn't a one and done. It needs to be repetitive, provide cargo runs that folks can depend on and plan their missions around. The bridge to the gap might be performing that one and done, but put as many missions as possible on it. Moon Express is contracted with Rocket Lab for an exclusive mission, but we have to build the bridge. I propose a power team. Team Indus's rover, Moon Express's multi-purpose modular landers, SpaceX's relatively inexpensive heavy lifter, and the molten regolith electrolysis MRE, reactor, an excavator, a hopper, and a feed system, the power system, and an oxygen liquefaction and storage system proposed by Samuel S. Schreiner et al. In a paper submitted to a 2015 IEEE Aerospace conference. All of these teams could get together to not only fill all the respective missions for their respective customers, but show the commercial space community that the supply chain and logistics of landing on the moon is ready for prime time. Okay, so conclusions and recommendations. Getting cislunar space ready for prime time is like building a ladder as you climb. You have to keep the structural integrity of the base in mind, or else you won't gain any altitude at all in the attempt to add rungs to the top. I'm not one to say that the world needs to cooperate to get to space. In fact, there's an obvious argument to be made that competition fuels innovation and accelerates the development of space infrastructure. What you can do is collaborate on projects that will net each respective contributor the piece of the pie they were after. If Lunar 8 is after the surface of the moon, then get with others that have already gotten to the stratosphere. Then get with those who have already gone to suborbital space. Graduate to orbital class. Find a buddy who has a prototype for a gizmo that uses lunar regolith to make hydrogen and oxygen, then offer them a way to get their prototype to the surface with a promise of some of that fuel for your ascent back to lunar orbit. It's not altruistic. Everyone is after the same goal, to realize their own venture and be the best at what they do best. The best way to innovate is to focus on your own interests, and while that may sound cynical, it's not really. It's just business. I'll catch you all next week.